Welcome to Lake Sawyer Church. We are a church in the heart of our community with a heart for our community. A church that longs to help people find and follow Jesus. A church that is for all people. People in varying stages of their spiritual journey. People who are hurting and broken. People who need hope. People of all races and backgrounds. People who are young and people who are old. We are for the single parent, the empty nesters, those with kids and those without. We are a church that invests in our kids and our students. We believe that they aren't just the church of tomorrow, they are the church of today. We make room for all people because we have seen time and time again how Jesus changes everything for everyone.
Hey, good morning, Lake Sawyer. Why don't y'all stand up? We're gonna do some singing this morning. Here we go. We worship the God who was. We worship the God who is. We worship the God who evermore will be. Open prison doors, He parted the raging sea. My God, He holds the victory. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. Shout out your praise. We sing to the God who heals. We sing to the God who saves. We sing to the God who always makes a way. And He hung upon that cross, then He rose from the grave. My God, still rolling stones away. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet. We'll shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. We were the beggars, now we're royalty. We were the prisoners, now we're running free. We are forgiven, accepted, redeemed by His grace. Let the house of the Lord sing praise. Let's do some clapping, come on. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. There's joy in the house of the Lord today. We won't be quiet. We shout out your praise. There's joy in the house of the Lord. Our God is surely in this place. We won't be quiet. We shout out How's everyone doing today? You doing all right? So glad that you are here. We're going to teach you a new one today, and it comes right out of Scripture. So we're going to throw that Scripture up on the screen here right now. It says, "Come, let us sing for joy to the world. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods." We have hope in the midst of trial, and we can celebrate in the midst of celebration with a kind of joy that only he can give. So we're going to sing this song. Jump in when you can. Of course, we're going to put the words up on the screen for you. Here we go. Tries to steal what you say, saying I have no reason to praise. I will give thanks. I will give thanks. When the roar that I hear is the voice of my fear, trying to silence this hope in my heart, I will give thanks. I will give thanks. A song of salvation is my battle cry. With joy as my weapon, I'll stand and defy the lie of the dark with my hands lifted to the sky. I will rejoice. I will rejoice. I will dance in your kindness and claim every yes and amen. I will rejoice. I will rejoice. I will shout of your goodness forever again and again. When it's all stripped away and it seems it's too late, hope is buried and dead in the grave, I'll speak your name. I'll speak your name. A song of thanksgiving is my battle cry. With joy as my weapon, I'll stand and defy the lie of the dark with my hands lifted to the sky. I will rejoice. I will rejoice. I will dance in your kindness and claim every yes and amen. I will rejoice. I will rejoice. I will shout of your goodness forever again and again. Again and again. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. Oh, I'll never stop, no, I'll never stop, no, nothing can stop my praise. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. I'll never stop, no, I'll never stop, no, nothing can stop my praise. And I will rejoice, I will rejoice, I will dance in your kindness and claim every yes and amen. I will rejoice, I will rejoice, I will shout of your goodness forever again and again. song of hope. Sing it loud. Don't be shy.
God is so good. It's so good to hear you all sing that song. You may have a seat. My name is Jennifer, one of the staff members here. I want to read Lamentations 3:22 through 24 to you. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. I don't know about you guys, but there are times in my life where I feel far away from God, where I wonder, is he real? Is all this real? I don't hear him, I don't feel him, I don't see him. And it's in those moments that what I need the most is to be with him. And what I need the most is to be here with you, worshiping him and being reminded of his faithfulness and his goodness, and that he is faithful despite what I do, that his character is that of faithfulness. And I need to remember all the things that he's done in my life because of his faithfulness, not because of anything that I've done. And I need to worship and I need to take communion, because in communion, I have a tangible thing in my hand that reminds me that he is real and that he is faithful. And it reminds me that Jesus came and did what he did for us, that God came and lived in a human body and walked on this earth, and he taught, and he gave of himself to the ultimate end, which was death, only to overcome that death and to create a pathway for you and me to be in relationship with God, our faithful, faithful God. And so this morning, if you are newer with us and you haven't taken communion with us before, we do this every week, and we have tables at each entrance with a little cup, and in that cup's a cracker and some juice. And so we'll take communion together now as a reminder of all that Jesus has done for us to be in relationship with God the Father. That because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed. His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. And so the cracker that you hold is a representation of Jesus' body on the cross that was placed there for us. So if you take the cracker now and remember his body. And the juice represents the blood that he willingly poured out as a sacrifice for us. And we remember him now and the blood that he poured out for us. Let me pray for you. Father, I'm so thankful for your faithfulness, that despite us, despite our imperfect selves, that sometimes are far from you only because of choices that we make. Sometimes I might choose to be far away from you. You are always near. You are always faithful. You are always good. You are always with us. And we see that in Jesus. And we are thankful. We know that when we gather two or more in your name, that you are here with us, and I believe you're here now. And we are thankful. We love you. We're here to worship you. We're here to learn more about you. We're here to know you together. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Well, I'm so glad to see all of you here this morning. It's always good to be together. And if you're newer with us, we're really grateful you chose to spend a little bit of time with us today. And we really want you to feel welcome here. We want you to know that we are grateful that you came, and we want to meet you and say hello and begin to help you navigate what it is to be part of Lake Sawyer and kind of learn all the things that we have going on. So we have something called a Connect card. We would love it if you'd fill that out if you're newer here, just so that we can reach out and say hi and welcome. There's a QR code on the screen. You can scan that and just fill out that form. It just takes a minute. And you'll get an email from me saying, hi, welcome. I'm the friendly one on staff. So actually, we're all friendly. We're all friendly. I might be a little extra friendly. The introverts are like, oh no, here comes Jennifer. We have something really cool going on today after this service called Baby D. It's our baby dedication celebration. So we have some families who are going to dedicate their children to God. And as a part of what we do here at Lake Sawyer, we value families. We love our families. And we want to come around them and just help them celebrate this time that's so special in the life of their child. And so we're inviting you to stay. We want you and we need you to stay because this is important for our families who are doing this. So right after this service, 12:15, we'll have some snacks. You can stick around. We're going to celebrate these families and these babies. So we can't wait to see you here right after this. So don't leave. That's what I'm saying. We also want to take a moment every Sunday to talk about generosity. We have an incredibly generous church, so thank you for partnering with us. We can only do the things we do because of our partnership with you. So if you haven't yet done that and you'd like to start, we have boxes on the way out. You can give there, or you can go online and give as well there. Third week of our Distracted series, and it's a good one, so buckle up. Have a good morning.
So how many felt a little uncomfortable? Yeah, I should be very clear, I'm not late. That was intentional. We wanted to create a moment of silence because the reality is for so many of us, there is a tension in silence. There's a bit of uncomfortableness. You guys handled it much better than first service. First service made it about 30 seconds, and then they started clapping and wooting, I needed a cheering section before I got out of here. But here's the thing, is again, these moments, they do something to us. We're so just programmed to be busy and have constant movement and noise in our life that when we find these moments where there's just silence, we can get a little uncomfortable. Out of just curiosity, how many of you thought about reaching for your phones? Okay, all right, how many of you actually reach for your phones? Yeah, okay, we do that. We're I'll just, awkwardness, I'll just go to my phone and I'll just browse my phone. I'll fill the time when it with my phone. And the thing is, the phones are this treasure trove of distraction. There's so many ways to keep us occupied, to keep us busy, that we never have to come face to face with silence. A few months ago, we took our kids to Disneyland. It was the first time we'd been to Disneyland since we had moved up here, so it'd been a couple years for them. And we were kind of gearing up for the whole experience and trying to help them understand, Disneyland's different. I remember the good old days when we would go to the park where we'd get in a line and you'd wait in a line for a ride for 2 hours, and you had nothing else to do but to talk to the people that you were with, or you would just stare off at the distance. I can't tell you how much time I stood at Indiana Jones in the line and just stared at the forest. Or when you get really bored, you start talking to the people in front of you or behind you, because we just fill the space. But our kids, they never have to fill the space. They never have to fill time. Candidly, we've kind of become a little bit lazy ourselves because we have phones with us. And so we don't sit in the silence. And so we're trying to gear our kids up for this and this experience. And I remember it the rubber met the road. We were sitting in the line for Rise of the Resistance, which is the new Star Wars ride. And we knew it was going to be a 2-hour wait. And so we're kids, it's going to be 2 hours. It's going to be worth it. Everyone says it's amazing, but we need to be prepared just to be bored for 2 hours because we're not going to go to our phones. We're not going to go to our devices right away. And they were good. They were really good for the first 30 minutes. And then I realized we have a long way to go before we actually get on this ride. And so I'm how am I going to entertain the kids? And so we're playing clapping games and telling stories. And finally, I'm running out of parental ideas, my wife and I notice that there is a QR code. And I've become Pavlov's dog. I'm oh, QR code. I must scan QR code. I have no idea what it is, but every time I see a QR code, I scan it these days. So I scan the QR code, and it opens up an app called Disney Play. And I'm oh, this is fascinating. Start reading about the app. I download the app, and what it is an interactive phone-based game that helps distract you when you wait in line. I thought this is brilliant. Disney recognizes that if we can just keep you busy, if we can just keep you distracted, if you're not just sitting in the uncomfortableness of the silence, you're going to be less apt to get frustrated. It's going to make the whole time go by faster. And so that's what they want you to do. We're really good parents. We didn't let our kids do it, but I'm sure that's what they want people to do. Now, here's the thing. All of us have things in our life that we will use to distract us from the silence. Whether it's listening to music on Spotify, whether it's watching some shows on Netflix, or even browsing social media, I can always it blows my mind how I'll go to social media and I'm I've got past 15 minutes of time, and then before I know it, I've been on the thing for 2 hours. Just me? Cool, just me. We all have our distractions of choice. Our phones, our digital devices are the gateway to those distractions. Now, John Mark Comer, the author of the book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, this book is sort of the backdrop for this series. He would write these words. He would say, this new normal of hurry digital distraction is robbing us of the ability to be present to God, present to other people, present to all that is good, beautiful, and true in our world, even present to our own souls. What he's saying is that we are missing so much because we're distracted, because we're just all over the place. We're missing the power of being present in the moment. And when someone inevitably forces on us some level of silence, and I use the word force very intentionally because we don't step into that willingly for many of us. When it's forced upon us, what we find is we find ourselves being really uncomfortable or being kind of unnerved in those moments. But I actually believe it is those moments. The moments of silence that we're in the place, the posture where we can most experience God in what he wants to do in our lives. And perhaps one of the biggest reasons why we don't experience God's presence, why we don't see God doing big things in our lives, is because we don't sit long enough in a posture that is willing to listen to him. That we never slow down. We are never silent. We never create the space or time to be present with him. Now, Jesus would say these words in Mark chapter 11, sort of words that is like the base of our whole series. We keep coming back to it. Jesus says this in verse 28, "Come to me," he said. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy," he says, "and my burden is light." You see, to experience the kind of life that Jesus wants us to experience means we have to be willing to lead the kind of lives, to live the kind of life that Jesus himself lived. We take up his yoke. We take up his teachings. It's not just teachings that sit up here in our mind, but they're teachings that get fleshed out and lived out in our lives. When we model our lives after the things that Jesus valued, we begin to experience the full life that Jesus calls us to. And one of the things that is really clear all throughout the New Testament is the value and the priority that Jesus placed on silence and solitude. The amount of time that he practiced this, he put this into play in his life. You see, it's a central aspect to Jesus' life and ministry. And a perfect example of this can be found in the Gospel of Luke in chapter 4. And this is what we read. Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit, left the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness, where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them, he was hungry. And so as Jesus launches his public ministry, we're told one of the first things he does is he goes spends 40 days out in the desert. 40 days in the wilderness. Like for us as a business mindset, it's like if you're gonna launch something, you might not want to go into isolation for 40 days. It doesn't seem like really the best business strategy, but Jesus is not trying to launch a business. He's trying to teach us about a way to live. And so Jesus starts, he goes spend 40 days out in the desert, 40 days in silence, 40 days in solitude, 40 days with nothing but himself and God's presence and Satan's tempting in this moment. Now, in our culture, that seems like torture. Like if someone was like, you need to go spend a day out by yourself, not saying anything, it would feel a little bit like torture. As a matter of fact, it's like the harshest form of punishment. Like when someone is a really bad criminal that's done something, they don't just go to jail. When they're in jail and they've done something, they go to solitary confinement. Like they're left with themselves. And so with that mindset, we look at Jesus and we're like, man, what did Jesus do to deserve this? Like, why does he have to spend all that time out in the desert with nothing but his thoughts? And it seems, again, like a punishment. But what I want us to understand is for Jesus, this wasn't a punishment. For Jesus, this was a priority. For Jesus, this was a time for him to be able to tap into his power source, to be tapped in and connected with God. And it's not just like a singular incident or instant that happens in Jesus' life. It's something that we see Jesus does again and again and again. He withdraws to spend time in silence, to spend time in solitude, to spend time with God. Matter of fact, if you just move forward one chapter into Luke chapter 5, this is what we read, verse 16. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Matter of fact, 5 times in Luke's gospel, Luke notes that Jesus withdrew from the crowd. He withdrew to be with himself. He withdrew to connect with God. Now, if you're an introvert, this sounds like amazing. You're like, man, crowds are overwhelming. It can get to you. It can wear you down. You're like, I get this. Jesus must have been an introvert too. That's why he keeps withdrawing from people. But what I want us to understand is this is not like an introverted thing or even an extroverted thing. It's an acknowledgement, again, of where the power is. That Jesus knows that he needs to connect again and again and again to hear the voice of God, to be strengthened by the power of God. And silence, as much as we dislike it, creates that space. It creates the environment for God to be able to speak in and work in our lives. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, well, I just wish. I really wish that God would be more present to me. Like, I really wish that God would speak to me more, that I'd hear from him more in my life. Like, we want these things in our lives, but yet we're not willing to do some of the simple things to help create that space for God to speak to us. We don't want to sit in silence, but we want God to shout over all the voices and all the noise that we experience in our culture. And what's happening is there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect from what we really want and our willingness to do the things that help us achieve or to get what it is that we want in our lives. A theologian by the name of William Barclay put it this way. He would say, it may well be that the whole trouble in our lives is that we give God no opportunity to speak to us. Because we do not know how to be still and to listen. We give God no time to recharge us with spiritual energy and strength because there is not time when we sit and wait upon him. How can we shoulder life's burdens if we have no contact with him who is the Lord of all good life? I mean, these words by Barclay here, they're so profound. And they accurately describe the tension that we live in. Like, God, we want more of you, God. We want more of your presence. We want to hear your voice more clearly in our lives, but yet we are unwilling to create the space for it to happen. Maybe you hear me saying this, you're like, yeah, but Jesus didn't have a cell phone. Like, if Jesus had a cell phone, then he would have had all the distractions of life. Like, he would have been busy. He would have all these things going on. If he would have had a cell phone, his life would have looked a lot more like my life. Or if Jesus had an overbearing boss like I have. If Jesus had the kind of boss that demanded so much of me, then his life would look like mine. Or if Jesus had kids. If he had kids, man, those kids would be taking up all of his time. He would find no time for silence. And he'd be running around like a chicken with his head cut off, just like I am. We have a tendency to look at Jesus' life and think just because his distractions were different, it's like he didn't have distractions at all. But what is clear is when you read through his life, when you read through his ministry, when you read the New Testament and the Gospels, you see how much demand there was on Jesus' time. Everybody wanted something from Jesus. They wanted time with him. They wanted him to heal him. They were always looking for Jesus' presence. And so while his distractions might look different than ours, his life had the same temptations, that there was the same draw and pull from people and things that would cause him to lose focus on what mattered. We actually see a perfect example of this in Mark chapter 6. In Mark chapter 6, verse 30, we read that the apostles gathered around Jesus and reported to him all they had done and taught. Then, because so many people were coming and going, they didn't even have a chance to eat. And so the setup here is the disciples have come back. They're telling Jesus, look, this is what we've been up to. This is what we've been doing. And people are coming and going, and they're busy. And a lot of stuff's happening. They're busy getting their work done, all the tasks for the day done. And the text tells us that they had no time to eat. Now, my wife's one of these people where, like, we'll go throughout a day, and it'll be like at 4 o'clock at night, and she'll be like, oh, I didn't eat today. You know someone like that? Yeah, that's not me. That's not me. Like, I don't ever miss a meal. Like, if I have to miss a meal, something has gone catastrophically wrong in my day. Like, there is always time for food. There's always time to pause, to eat. But for these disciples, they're like, we were so busy. We were so busy. We had so much going on. There was so much demand for our time, so much distraction that we had to deal with that we couldn't even grab a snack to tide us over. And this should be the moment where Jesus is like, good job, well done, good and faithful servant. Let's go get some Chick-fil-A. Like, let's just go out, let's just feast, let's have a good time. You have earned this meal. But that's not what Jesus says. What Jesus says is he says to them, come with me. Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. If I was one of the 12, I'd be like, excuse me, Jesus, hold on a second. I'm hungry. Like we haven't eaten all day. It's been really busy. We've kind of all acknowledged that. Like you could probably hear the grumbling in my stomach. Like it would be really good for me to get some food before I can rest. Because I don't know if this is true of you, but I cannot rest on an empty stomach. Like I'm just not helpful to anyone or good for anything if I'm hungry. And so I would really, really struggle with this. But here's what I want us to understand. And this is why verse 31 here is so important. Because verse 31 here, it reminds us that there is something more. There is something more important, something that we should focus on more than the distractions. Well, I'm hungry. I'm really, really hungry. I could really use some food. Well, come with me, Jesus says. Come with me to a quiet place and get rest. Oh, but I have a lot of work to do. I need to get my work done. No, come to me to a quiet place and get some rest. But you see, like, Jimmy's got to go to this sporting event, and then I got to pick him, I got to take him over here, and then there's this thing going on, and then we have this, and I have this work event. No. Come with me to a quiet place and get some rest. There is no shortage. There will be no shortage in the things that will attempt us to be distracted and to take our focus off of God. And what Jesus models again and again and again is he models that no matter how busy he got, that he would still prioritize his relationship with the Father. Matter of fact, the busier he got, the more intentional he was about making time for these moments, to spend time with God. It's part of how he pushed back against the constant noise and distraction of our world. I was looking in this past week of like, what is the noise level of the world? Like, where do we like find ourselves from like the ambient level of noise? Because I'm curious, like we know that with cars and everything else that the levels of noise have just increased in our society. And so 70 years ago, the normal level of noise, the ambient noise was 50 decibels. And just for like context's sake, so you can kind of visualize or imagine what that's like, 50 decibels is like light falling rain. So not like the rain this morning. That's like a deluge. In June. Anyways, I digress. It's like a light falling rain. You know, like the mist that we get in the winter? It's kind of peaceful, soothing. Over the last 70 years, that level has raised by 20 dB. And if you start at 0, if that was your baseline, 0 going up to 20 dB, it's very, very minimal. It's like the small buzz of an appliance. But when you put that on top of the existing 50 decibels that we live with, it's brought us to a point, 70 dB, where we live today, where that's the level of noise that's like rush hour traffic. Braking. Cars accelerating, horns, it's this loudness. And this is the environment that we live in. This is what we've just become accustomed to, that there's just more and more noise in our world. Every day there's more and more noise, there's more and more distraction, and all of this noise drowns out the voice of God. And consequently, when it becomes harder to hear God because we're less intentional about the spaces where we can hear God, all the other voices in our world get louder. The voices that say, you know what? You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're unlovable. Or your past, it's unforgivable. Like these are the voices we start to hear louder and louder in our lives. And maybe it's not even just a voice that's negative. It's a voice that says, you know what? Pursue this thing. Like this thing over here, this is the thing that will really bring you joy and life. Or you know what? Your identity really should be found in this thing. Like you go after that thing. That's really what matters most. Or what people say about you. Or what other people think about you, that's what matters the most. With all of the noise and all of the distraction, these are the voices that are just attacking our minds and our heart, and it makes it harder and harder and harder to hear Jesus say these words, "You are my beloved child. I love you." With all the distraction, with all that's vying for our attention and focus, we miss the still small voice of God who declares, "I love you. You are my beloved child." You see, when we sit in silence and we listen to God, we attune our ears to God, we create the space and the environment to hear him say that to us. We create the opportunity for the Spirit to begin to do some transforming work in our lives. See, could it be that we aren't experiencing the kind of lives that Jesus calls us to, not because God is absent? I think that's sometimes what we jump to. Well, I'm not experiencing a full life. I'm not hearing from God. It must mean that God is absent. Could it be that God isn't absent, but that we're just too distracted to listen? You see, this is why I think silence, the intentional practice of silence in our life, is paramount in our apprenticeship of Jesus. Like, these are things that we have to do. It's not that it's like, oh, it's a good thing for super Christians. Like, if you're a Christ follower, this is critical. It's part of the way that you push back against the ways of the world. And all throughout the series, what we've said is we're going to talk about some of these things, but we're going to talk very practically about how you can put some of these practices in play in your life, as we talked about this idea of a rule of life. It's not rules for life, but it's like these rhythms and these practices that help us from being distracted and help us focus on our relationship with God. Last week, there was two things I invited you guys to do as we talked about some of just the distractions we deal with. The first one was I invited everyone to do a purchase pause. So to pick a period of time, 30 days, 2 months, 6 months, a year, and be committed to say, I'm not going to purchase anything outside of some specific things that I have decided ahead of time to do. How many of you guys did that? How many of you guys tried to do it and then failed? A few more? Yeah, so for accountability purposes, I'm not purchasing anything for the next 30 days with one exception. This afternoon, I'm leaving to go fly fish with some friends, so I have to buy flies, otherwise I'm just slapping a line on water, which would still be fun, but it's not the intended purpose. But that was part of my thing. The other thing I said is to consider to do a possession purge. Like to go through your house and to look at the things like, okay, what are the things that I don't need, and be willing to just give them away or throw them away. And I said whether that's 30 things or 2,022 things for the year 2022, just be willing to purge some of your possessions. How many of you guys did that? Handful of people? Now this was interesting. This was true of both services. We're more apt to throw away the things that we have than we are to stop the consumption that we desire for more. Like, okay, I'll throw things away. I'm going to throw all this stuff away because what it really will do is just create space for me to fill it in with more. And so this week, I'm going to talk about two other things. Again, with this idea of silence and prioritizing that in your daily life. Here's some things I want you to consider. The first is this. Look for simple moments of silence. What a simple moment is it's an already existing moment that we have, that we make a choice to be available and to be present with God. So here's an example. How many of you guys, by just show of hands, how many of you guys start your day with a cup of coffee? Yes, like a lot of us start our day with a cup of coffee. Okay, how many of you have that cup of coffee in one hand and a phone in the other hand? Yes, yeah, me too. So it's not like I'm not just hanging you out to dry here. Yeah, like I do this. I'm drinking my coffee and I'm catching up on everything that I would have missed in the 8 hours that I slept at night. And because I don't want to miss out on anything. And so I'm balancing these two things. What it means to have a simple moment of silence is like, get your coffee, drink your coffee, and just sit there in silence. Don't pick up the phone. It means sitting on your couch and not watching TV. It means getting in your car and driving into work on your commute, and instead of listening to the radio, instead of listening to a podcast, instead of listening to an audiobook, or even, I'm going to say it, even listening to your Bible, sit there in silence. Create space for God to meet you in those moments. Create space for you to connect with God in the existing moments that you already have in your day. You see, the thing here is what we're talking about is not a complete restructuring, rebuilding of a person's schedule. What we're talking about is intentionality of the moments you have and a willingness to be present in those moments of silence. And as we talked about, as we started our message this morning, it's really hard for us to be present in silence. And so we need to work on that. We need to make sure that we're practicing this in our life so we can put ourselves in a continual place to hear from God. So that's a simple moment of silence. The second thing I want us to consider is this: a set time of silence. And maybe if you're like, well, is that like a quiet time? Yes. That's partly what I'm talking about. It's having intentional time where you're like, this is my space. This is my time to focus on my relationship with God. And for many of us, we have a practice like this that plays out in our lives. But this is a little bit different than the first one. If the first one requires intentionality, this requires a little bit of discipline. And as people, we're not all that good with discipline. It's the reason why in January gyms are filled, but in February they're a ghost town. It's a reason why so many of us, we set New Year's resolutions only to get about 30 days in and to see those resolutions fall off. We're not really great with discipline. And so the set times help us grow in discipline. And it requires us to put some structure around what it is that we're doing. That it's not just leveraging these one-off moments, but it's saying, this is your time, God. This is your space. This is for me to connect with you. And so I want to get just a kind of practical here and talk about some of the things you can do to structure that time. And the first is this: pick a place. And I know that might seem like really simplistic and like, is that really part? Yes, like we have to be willing to define a place. And maybe for you, it's like you have a chair in your living room and you'd be like, that's my place. Or it's a room, or it's your office. It's some defined place where you're like, when I get into that chair, when I get into this space, I will be focusing on my relationship and my connection with God. I'll be sitting silent in his presence as I go through this. What it doesn't mean is, it doesn't mean like, hey, on your drive into work, make that your quiet time. Or as you're doing things around the house, make that the time that you're connecting with God. Those are good, but those are the simple moments. This is a dedicated place. It's a dedicated time. So pick the place. The second piece is to pick the time. Decide in advance when you're going to do it. So it's, hey, when I wake up in the morning, I'm going to spend time with God in this place. Or maybe it's like at lunch, I've got this dedicated time that I'm going to spend with God. Or before I go to bed at night, I'm going to spend that time with God. It's not just defining that time, but defining how long that you're going to spend. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes. I'm going to spend 10 minutes. I'm going to spend 30 minutes. Whatever that time is, pre-decide both of those things. So again, I'm going to spend time with God in this chair. I'm going to do it when I wake up in the morning for 30 minutes every single morning. And then the third piece of that is to pick a plan. And here's what I would say. What it is that you do doesn't really matter. Like at the end of the day, there's no like right or wrong way to spend time with God. What matters most is not so much what you do, but it's whose presence that you're in. Like, you know, we get so focused, we're so driven, and we want to perform. It's like, my quiet time, I must read this few chapters of my Bible reading plan, and then I need to review all my prayer requests, and then I need to pray for those things and mark how God answered them, and I check that off, and then I'll have this set time where I just sit and I listen to God, and I check that off, and if I get the 9 things done that I have planned to do as my plan, then I will have accomplished my quiet time. And we make it so rigid, so structured, that we lose the relational connection piece to that moment. So again, it might sound weird. I don't care what you do. It's not about what you do. It's about who you're with. You're with Jesus. You're present with him in those moments. And so be present. Abide in him. Abide in those moments. And whatever the plan is, just do it. But I think it's important to still have a plan because it helps us prioritize in advance how we're going to use our time. And I also believe that in that time, whatever it looks like, you need to create space to do nothing but listen, to sit in silence and allow God to speak to you in those moments. Here's what we know. We know that the things that we value in life are the things that we prioritize, the things that we plan. Like if you look at your calendar, if you look at your schedule, that is a list of really the things that you value in your life because you put some definition around it. Like for example, if you do sales for work, you would never go to a client and go, okay, I got some availability next Tuesday. So next Tuesday, if you would just sit by your phone all day, I'm gonna call you at some point. I really don't know which point it is, but like when I have some time and it just feels good, I'm gonna go ahead and reach out to you at that point. Like you would never do that. You would say, hey, I'm gonna call you next Tuesday, 10 a.m. I need 30 minutes of your time because I wanna share something with you. Like you would define it. You would put a plan around it. And if you look at our calendars, if our calendars reflect what it is that we value, if you look at the rhythm of our lives, what the truth is, many of us don't value our relationship with God. Many of us aren't prioritizing and putting a focus on what it is that should matter the most. And here's why all this is important. As we develop these habits, as we develop the practice of withdrawing to spend time with Jesus on a regular basis, where our ears will become more attuned to his word and where lives will become more aligned and will be more present for his leading. You see, silence helps us slow down and to hear the voice of God. Silence puts us in a posture where the Spirit can begin to work and to form us more and more like Christ day in and day out. And here's what I believe with all my heart. God can do more. God can do more with a few moments of silence than you can do with a day of productivity. I'm gonna say that again because I need you to hear it. I believe that God can do more in your life with a few moments of silence than you can accomplish in a day of productivity. And so as we wrap up this morning, I'm going to invite you into that place of silence. If we started this morning with this awkward moment, can we redeem it for something different? Can we be still enough to find peace and connection in the midst of silence? And so using the same three things, we're going to pick a place. You're in a chair. That's your place. We're going to pick a time. For the next 3 minutes, we're gonna give you space just to be silent before God. We're gonna pick a plan. The plan is simple. I'm gonna invite you to close your eyes. I'm not asking you to say anything. I don't want you to say anything. I don't want you to talk to God. I want you to close your eyes. I want you just to focus on him. And here's what I know. You'll get 5 seconds into it, and you'll be thinking about something else. And you'll be like, no, God, no, I'm focusing on you. And so when that happens, don't beat yourself up. Just acknowledge it. Go to God, I'm going to be present. God, I'm going to focus on you. God, I'm going to be intentional this time. Speak to me. So I want to invite you into that space. And here's the thing. If you're new to this whole church thing, you're like, this is really weird. Like this is where they close my eyes and they do something to me. They lay hands on me. Like what happens in this moment? And here's the thing. I get it. Because I've been where you're at. Like I didn't grow up in the church, and so I've been in these moments, and I'll tell you, it was a moment very similar to this moment that God spoke to me. That God made himself known to me. And so I promise, like, all I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to be willing to maybe say, God, if you're real, make yourself known to me, and then just sit there. And maybe if that's still too weird to you, then let this be a gift to you. Like where else in your life do you get 3 minutes to do absolutely nothing but just rest? But for all of us, I want to invite us into this moment, to close our eyes, to focus on God, to see the way our mind wanders, but to bring it back and allow him to speak to us. And at the end of that time, I'll come up and I'll close us in prayer. God, I sit here. I reflect in this time. And I recognize, even though I've had a week to prepare for this moment, how quick my mind is to wander. The moment we step into the space, I'm thinking about the next thing. I'm thinking about what I have to do. I think about this thing. And God, I know I'm not alone. That so much of the busyness and the distraction of our world makes these moments so difficult to be present in. But yet we know that this is what it means. These spaces are part of how we live out our faith, how we live out our connection with you, God. And so I pray that you would encourage us to carve out these moments, to find the time just to be present and silent before you. And Father, whether those are simple moments or they're structured moments, God, I pray that over time and as this discipline and this practice develops in our lives, we find you and connect with you in ways that we never imagined possible. It is in the stillness and the silence, Lord, that you bring peace to our heart, that you bring comfort to our minds. And that you form us to be more and more like your Son, Jesus. We pray all these things in his name. Amen. I really want to invite you, encourage you this week to put these things into practice. Again, I believe with all my heart that you said yes to Jesus. For those of us who've submitted our lives to Jesus, you said yes to Jesus because you wanted to be more and more like Christ. And that just doesn't happen from just showing up. It happens from us leaning in and to learning to live out the way of Jesus. So look for those simple moments, look for those set times, create a set time, and prioritize this in your rule of life. Next week, we're going to be continuing in our series, Distraction. We're going to talk about Sabbath, kind of like the forgotten day that many of us don't ever consider or talk about. And so we're going to talk about the value and importance that this has in our lives so we live out what it means to be a Christ follower. Also, again, just want to remind you, hang around and just like 25 minutes or so, we're going to be kicking off Baby D. And we'd love just to have you guys here to be a support and encouragement for these families who are making this decision to dedicate their children. Guys, thank you so much and have a wonderful week.